Welcome, my curious people. We've all obviously heard of Apple, and I assume some of you might even be watching this video on an Apple product right now. A lot is known about the company co-founder Steve Jobs, but what was he like as a parent? It is known that he was a complicated and demanding person, and that his oldest daughter exposed the truth of him as a father. But what about his other children? What do you think of him? What was the difference between his approach to his children? And which child did have the best relationship with him? So now you better hit the bell and the subscription button and stay with me to learn about all the tea on Steve. Maybe try and understand Steve as a family man. It is important to look at Steve Jobs' childhood. Stephen Paul Jobs was born on February 24th in 1955 in San Francisco. His father was Abdul Fattah Jandali from Syria, and his mother was Joanne Schiebel, and she was half German and half Swiss. Jobs' parents were students, and they gave him up for adoption right after he was born, and that is how Steve ended up with Paul and Clary Jobs. Many years later, when he was already an adult, Steve had found his biological mother. The pair reunited, and Steve also got to meet his sister Mona, who was born after his parents had given him up for adoption. It was Mona who had found their biological father, who abandoned the family. He ran a restaurant where all successful people who worked in the tech industry came for lunch. Since Steven was exactly that kind of person, he visited the restaurant, and then the two even met by accident, and on an occasion even shook hands. This, however, didn't change Steve's attitude towards his father, and one of the main reasons for that was the fact that he abandoned his family. Now, the thing that Steve was most known for, his career. It was 1976 that Jobs, along with Steve Wozniak, founded Apple and produced Apple I personal computer. A year later, they gained fame and wealth on the American computer market after they sold the Apple II. It was around that time that Lisa Brennan Jobs was born. Her mother, Chris-Ann Brennan, who Jobs had a 5-year-long relationship with, and she became pregnant shortly before the pair broke up. In the beginning, Steve wouldn't admit that it was his child. He actually stood by that statement for many years. Can you imagine how it would feel if your father denied for years that you were their child? The company kept moving forward, and the same year that his daughter was conceived, Apple began working on a new personal computer, one of the first in the world that offered the user interface and a mouse. When the computer was launched, it was revealed that it was called Apple Lisa. Since Brennan never gave permission for Steve to use the baby's name, he and his team came up with an alternative name just in case anyone questioned it. The explanation would have been that Lisa was an acronym for Local Integrated Software Architecture. And what do you think the truth is? Now to the interesting, juicy gossip part. Jobs' firstborn daughter is obviously an adult, and she has decided to release a book about her father and their family life. She wrote pieces about her father before, but now all that information and more would be in one place. The book, titled Small Fry, tells it like it is. It seems that she wasn't trying to be too considerate about her relationship with her father. Lisa revealed many details about the family and the difficult conditions she grew up in, and how she felt lonely and abandoned. And in all honesty, who wouldn't be if their father tried to deny for many years that you weren't their child? In the book, Lisa admitted that Steve was not interested in what was happening to her for the first 2 years of her life, and that he didn't pay any child support. During that time, her mother had a very difficult time making ends meet without having a permanent job or her own apartment. Those early days of the company had Jobs fully devote himself to it. It was only once Chris-Ann went to court with the case, and the court ordered a DNA test which showed a 95% probability of Lisa being his daughter. This caused Jobs to change his tune, if you will. Though not much changed since the court ordered Jobs to pay child support, the man began visiting his daughter, though he didn't really fulfill his role as a dad. This brings up the question of whether Steve's attitude was like this because of his own relationship, or rather lack of, with his biological dad. In 1983, an article appeared in Time magazine about Steve, as he became their person of the year, and naturally the topic of family and his daughter came up, and this is where things get a little bit, and maybe even a lot, mean. And in his responses, Jobs stated that 28% of the male population could be the father. Though funnily enough, despite all of this, he supposedly carried a photo of Lisa in his wallet, and if that seemed too nice on his part, if anyone asked him if it was his child, Jobs would reply that it wasn't his child, but as she didn't have one, he tried to be with her and support her. Now, that does seem a little bit absurd, doesn't it? What did Jobs think that if people knew about Lisa, all those circumstances in his tech companies would fail? If you would like to know more about the book and how Lisa felt, then check out this video. While Lisa never hid her disappointment and hurt on how her dad treated her in her early years of her life, what can be said of how Steve's other children felt and what their relationship with their dad was like? In 1991, Jobs married his second wife, Laurene Powell, and the two had 3 children, Eve Jobs, Reed Jobs, and Erin Sienna Jobs. Many said that after the birth of Reed, who was his first child with Laurene, Steve drastically changed his lifestyle. It is said that he took family life very seriously and became an affectionate father. That was a lifestyle he would keep for the rest of his life, one of a hardworking CEO, but one that would put his family first and didn't choose the celebrity lifestyle path. Jobs' biographer Walter Isaacson commented on his family life and that it astonished him to see just how normal it was and that Steve never went out and was home every evening to have a meal with his family. Even Jobs himself said, "I have a very simple life. I have my family, I have my Apple and Pixar, I don't do much else." Whilst all that seems fine and normal to you, Steve's biographer also noted that his relationship with his children was not all that happy. Isaacson also noted that while Jobs had a special relationship with his son Reed, it wasn't the same with his daughters. We already know of his relationship with Lisa, but what about Erin and Eve? Well, apparently Steve didn't pay all that much attention to Erin, who was the quiet one out of her siblings, but he did like the strong will and temper of his youngest child Eve. Now we should take a look at the children themselves. Let's start with his son Reed. Not much is known about Reed and what he is currently doing, but here is what we do know. As I mentioned before, Steve had a special relationship with his son, and speaking with the biographer, Steve said that after he was diagnosed with cancer, he made a deal with God, which is what he wanted to see his son graduate. Isaacson described Reed as an intense young man like his father who inherited the sweetness of his mother. After Jobs was diagnosed with cancer, apparently Reed decided to become a cancer researcher. And ever since his father's passing, Reed remained out of the spotlight and started charting his own path by entering the medical field at Stanford University. Moving on to talk about Jobs' middle child with Laurene, Erin Sienna. Like we mentioned before, Erin was a quiet child, and that trait she took with her to adulthood. She likes to keep her life private and she doesn't like to divulge much about her life and whereabouts, so like with her brother, not much is known about her. What we do know is that she is skilled in architecture and design, a trait clearly inherited from her father who had a great sense of design, and following her father's death, she has maintained a modest lifestyle away from the limelight. And this brings us to Eve Jobs, Steve's youngest daughter and the one who does actually have a social media presence. At the age of 22, she is a student at Stanford University where she is expected to graduate from the class of 2021 according to her Instagram bio. Thanks to her Instagram profile, we can catch a glimpse into her life, and in recent posts there are a few photos of Eve herself as well as a few of her hanging out with her friends, which is pretty normal for a college student. There are also several photos of Jobs horse riding, which brings us to another thing that we do know about her. It seems that she inherited her father's knack for high performance and she's a rising star in the equestrian world. Eve competes regularly at horse shows, and in May of 2017, she won $130,000 in the CSI 3 Grand Prix at the Split Rock Jumping Tour in Lexington, Kentucky, and in August, she beat a number of riders to take home the top prize at the $100,000 Reliable Rentals Grand Prix with her horse venue De Filles des Hazels in British Columbia, Canada. In a 2016 interview during a tutoring service at Upper Echelon Academy, she spoke about her passion for the sport. Riding always keeps you humble. It's great to see your hard work pay off, but you have to constantly stay at the top of your game. She also added that the sport had taught her independence, dedication, and perseverance, which she could apply to all realms of her life. In his Steve Jobs biography, Isaacson described Eve as growing up as a strong-willed, funny firecracker and that she would often call her father's assistant at work to make sure that she was put in his calendar. Now we'll touch a bit more about the fact that Jobs had a close bond with his son Reed, but a distant one with his daughters. Isaacson wrote that Jobs developed a strong relationship with Reed, but with his daughters, he was more distant. As he was with others, he would occasionally focus on them, but just as often as he would completely ignore them when he had other things on his mind. Even Laurene herself, Steve's wife, and the mother of his 3 children, said that he focuses a lot at work and at many times has not been there for the girls. At one point, Steve himself marveled at his wife at how well her kids are turning out, especially since he hasn't always been there for them. This reportedly annoyed Powell because she had given up her career when Reed was 2 and when they decided that they wanted to have more children. So looking at everything, it seems that Steve wasn't even the perfect father for his other daughters, though at least he didn't try to deny that they were his this time, and it's quite interesting how the only child that he had a strong bond with was his son Reed. It's interesting to see that while Reed, Aaron, and Eve have decided to stay out of the limelight, Lisa has been making money on her father's name by taking part in many interviews as well as publishing the book. The question is whether is she only interested in letting people know the truth about her father, or if it's all about the money. Though as it was reported by the press after Steve's death, Lisa inherited several $1,000,000 because her father included her in his will. So maybe it's not about the money, but maybe some sort of closure after years of feeling abandoned and unwanted by her father. So my curious people, what do you think about all this? Do you think that Lisa was wrong in revealing all those details in her book, since his other children seems to say otherwise? And why do you think that he only had such a strong relationship with his son? Let me know in the comments below, and as always, please like and subscribe to our channel, and I shall see you tomorrow for a brand new video.